So this brings me to the lecture of this evening. The topic is the Inca in the Plaza, Change and Continuity in a World Heritage Historic Urban Center. So it is the conclusion of the day, presented by Professor Helaine Silverman, Professor of Anthropology at the University of Illinois and Director of the Collaborative for Cultural Heritage Management and Policy. Her fieldwork is conducted in, you are traveling around the world, in Peru, in Thailand, in England, in the United States. You have edited and written so many books, I'm not able to mention this here all, but what I have to mention is, recently you were co-editor of the Contested Cultural Heritage. This was in 2011, a very important publication. Cultural Heritage Politics in China. We have heard an article, a presentation about China. And let me see what else. Two other books you have edited. This is Tourism, Heritage, Tourism and Community, and for example, Multidisciplinary Perspectives in Archaeological Heritage Management. But the most important thing is, like Helaine Silverman, like Anna and Christina Cameron, they are members of the board of our series, Heritage Studies. Therefore, again, thank you very much for coming, Helaine, and I think we will, after this session, we will have a very interesting discussion on our series and on the developments of the picture, the future. So thank you very much for coming. The floor is yours.
Well, I want to thank Dr. Marie-Thérèse Albert for the invitation, which I have received multiple times since we met in October of 2010 at a meeting in Turkey, and it just has never worked out until now. So I am truly grateful for the opportunity to be here. It's wonderful to listen to all of your presentations and to have this chance to talk to you about something that I'm working on. And having heard various of the papers today, I think, and I hope I'm not deluding myself, I think what I'm going to talk about really intersects very well with some of the topics that we've discussed. So historic urban centers constitute approximately 1/3 of the cultural properties inscribed on UNESCO's World Heritage List. These ensembles have been inscribed because of their architectural interest. They, quote, contain a large number of ancient buildings of monumental importance which provide a direct indication of the characteristic features of a town of exceptional interest, unquote. While historical knowledge of a town may evolve, the expectation of UNESCO is that its architectural integrity, authenticity, and physical urban form will not change, for these are what convey outstanding universal value. Yet precisely because they are architecturally noteworthy and inhabited, historic urban centers are subject to change. Their population may desire to modernize their homes and demand better municipal services and amenities. Also, historic centers attract tourism, which brings economic and infrastructural development. As Pendlebury et al. Ironically observe, the urbanness of urban World Heritage sites has opened up a series of problems for World Heritage Site Management. Unfortunately, UNESCO's operational guidelines for implementation of the World Heritage Convention do not provide specific prescriptions and proscriptions about the amount and kind of change to be permitted in historic centers following their inscription. This lack of guidance is problematical, for what is at play for residents living in these population centers is their social life and community. Otherwise, we would be talking about archaeological sites, ruins, abandoned settlements. As Harold Williams says, unlike museums in which the past is there to see but not to touch, Historic cities are places in which life continues to be lived, in which cultural heritage is not protected behind barriers, in which it's part of a populated community making its living and making a life. The population of a historic center does not live as did those who constructed the admired urban environment. That's why various management norms concerning historic urban environments seek to avoid their Disneyfication or inauthentic theming, and their museumification, which is their freezing in a particular moment of time. This point is very important because the influential British cultural critic John Ruskin, writing in the late 1800s, argued that pre-industrial cities, in other words, historic urban centers, need to be inhabited and lived in as in the past, and their space and their built components not transformed by the industrial age and social change, which he detested. Ruskin believed that only untouched would these urban environments be a refuge, in essence, a moral good. Architecture, he said, was key to memory, and by extension to the creation of identity. But Ruskin's relegation of the historic city to the past ignores the reality that the city is always in the process of becoming, of changing. One century's vernacular neighborhood is the next century's landmarked historic urban environment. Change, well conceived and well managed, is the key to the survival and sustainability of historic urban centers. A series of international declarations have recognized and addressed many of the challenges faced by living historic centers, and a significant evolution is evident in their management philosophy. Most notable is Gustavo Arauz's recent call for inclusion of intangible concepts and social values in heritage management under a new ICOMOS paradigm he phrases as tolerance for change, which eschews the management practice focused largely on physical fabric. The historic center of the city of Cusco, Peru, is an ideal research venue for testing these ideas. Its 142 hectares were inscribed on the World Heritage List in 1983 on the basis of the district's extraordinary Inca and spectacular Spanish Baroque architecture and the still extant Inca urban plan. A succession of master plans, a municipal code, as well as the national law governing municipalities and the Constitution itself, all impact the management of the built heritage of historic Cusco and its residential population. So too does a power struggle between the municipality and the Cusco branch of the Ministry of Culture, the Regional Directorate of Culture, or DRCC. They dispute which national legislation empowers which entity with what powers to care for and intervene in the built cultural patrimony, and what changes can and cannot be enacted in the sanctified zone. The DRCC regards Cusco as a zona intangible, untouchable. The municipality says that it is the legally authorized body to administer a dynamic living urban zone with a major tourism industry. The recurring conflict between the two agencies became unusually bitter when the immediately past mayor installed a 2-meter-high statue of an Inca king atop the Belle Epoque fountain in the center of the main plaza, and the DRCC responded by threatening legal action to get the statue removed and the mayor sent to jail for allegedly attacking the cultural patrimony. This fight has become a cause célèbre in the annals of heritage management in Peru, and it should receive widespread critical analysis because it raises larger matters overall concerning heritage management of historic urban centers. Specifically, At what point in time does a UNESCO inscription freeze an urban environment, given that these spaces do evolve? Where should we draw the physical as well as temporal line of inalterability? What kinds of physical change are permissible? How much physical change can a sensitive historic environment withstand before its visually recognizable quality is compromised? What role should the history of use and the desires of local residents and their intangible heritage play in the management of these World Heritage properties? I ask these questions because the DRCC mostly states their opposition to the statute on the basis of their understanding of UNESCO's framework for heritage conservation and management. The DRCC claims that the statute irreparably alters the historic ensemble of the Plaza, that it is a gross intrusion into the built environment recognized by UNESCO. Their other grounds for complaint are procedural, that the mayor should have consulted the DRCC before acting. In addition, a group of artists have denounced the statue as garish, and a leading local Inca scholar has decried the inaccuracy of the description and depiction of the Inca's costume. I want to defend the statue on 3 grounds. Temporal authenticity, by which I mean that heritage cities are the product of layers of development and habitation. Ideology. Second, the important local ideological role the statue is intended to fulfill versus official heritage management policy. And third, visual integrity, a topic that has risen to prominence in UNESCO over the past few years. Let's first consider temporal authenticity. To deal with the Inca on the fountain, we need to view Cusco diachronically, not in December 1983, when the historic district was inscribed on the World Heritage List as property number 273. Cusco was the capital of the great Inca Empire that conquered the greater part of Western South America in the 15th century. The pre-Hispanic city gleamed with magnificent palaces and temples erected with a stoneworking technology that has never been equaled. The heart of the Inca city was an enormous plaza called Jaucaipata, whose surface was covered by beach sand transported over the Andes Mountains from the distant Pacific shore. Following the defeat of the Incas, the Spanish began to transform Inca Cusco into a Spanish colonial city. The Spanish tore down many Inca buildings and built around and on top of others. They erected churches, convents, and important mansions for the powerful members of their society. Among other alterations to the indigenous urban fabric, they also reduced the size of Jaucaipata, cutting it into 2 unequal halves separated by a row of arches. The larger space is today's Plaza de Armas, where the cathedral and the Church of the Company of Jesus are located. The smaller part is the Plaza Regocijo, or Cusipata, where the municipal building is located. Notwithstanding its colonial glory, Cusco was isolated from the capital of Lima on the coast. Thus, it was a major statement of connectedness when a beautiful cast iron fountain arrived in Cusco between 1872 and 1877. This was the time of Ornato Publico, a program of civic embellishment that was part of a larger complex system of beliefs in Peru about progress, culture, public education, and control of urban space that was carried out by the Lima-led state and an elite seeking to consolidate itself. The provinces could demonstrate their relevance and development to the central government by imitating the physiognomy of Lima on the urban landscape. This is when many municipalities of Peru launched programs of beautification. The imported fountain was an affirmation of the role that the traditional Cusco elites arrogated to themselves and of their pretensions for Cusco toward Lima. All the fountains of this type had a crowning statue of some sort. But Cusco's statue had the form of a North American Indian, replete with bow, arrow, and leggings, elaborated in zinc and painted in vivid colors. A common oral history in Cusco says the New York Foundry had misunderstood the request for an Inca and sent a quote-unquote redskin, a piel roja, as Cusqueños called it, by mistake. No one knows how the piel roja came to be in Cusco. Then, in 1911, the Cusco elite united with their prefect to further enhance the appearance of the plaza, putting in 8-meter-wide cement sidewalks with drainage, 100 wrought iron benches, 4 ornamental gaslight posts, and gardens. These replaced the unadorned bare surface of the plaza that had existed for centuries. Just as the arrival of the French-style fountain in the 1870s had demonstrated the participation of Cusco on the national stage, so the Cusqueños now contended that their rehabilitation of the Plaza de Armas in 1911 was going to facilitate the participation of the city in international culture. They self-identified as sowers of progress and perceived the refurbishment of the plaza as evidence of the inclusion of Cusco among, quote, the most civilized of the continent. Cusqueños praised the cleanliness, paving, and adornment of the Plaza de Armas, which corrected its previous unsanitary conditions. They said that the new plaza was worthy of the attention of tourists and travelers, and that now Cusco shines as, quote, a mannered and civilized town. They said that from this moment, the plaza had entered a new stage, being now a healthy place in which to rest and conduct social life. Moreover, they said the plaza was a moralizing lesson. They did not refer at all to the fountain and its redskin statue. A very different opinion of the plaza, however, was expressed at that exact moment by a visiting member of the highest echelon of Lima society, Don José de la Riva Agüero. He wrote, quote, Cusco is the heart and symbol of Peru. The immense plaza had been the theater of many notable sufferings, and therefore the modern garden is ridiculous and bourgeois. Inexplicably, Riva Agüero said nothing about the Belle Époque fountain and its piel roja, even though they appear in his photo, nor do any of the other documents at the time reference the fountain. Significantly for us, Riva Agüero's criticism of the plaza resonates with the current debate taking place 100 years after his visit. So the Cusqueños lived happily with their incongruous piel roja for decades. At least there's no indication to the contrary, until it was pulled down by 2 miscreants in 1969, and it was not replaced until now. This brings us to the issue of ideology. On June 24, 2011, then Mayor Luis Arturo Flores Garcia revealed to the Cusqueño public a new element in the Plaza de Armas, a surprise for the annual celebration of the recreated Inca festival of Inti Raymi. Flores had commissioned the construction of an ushnu, or Inca platform. It was made of impermanent materials and placed over the fountain, hiding it. And on top of the fountain, he erected a golden statue of an Inca emperor. In his speech for the festival, the mayor explained that, quote, this is the site of the Inca. Here our Inca should be. We should study history to recover part of our identity. Everything grandiose that we have inherited is here amongst us, the great architectural complexes, part of tangible and intangible culture. And this is why our emperor should be here in the great plaza where we can all render appropriate homage to him. Mayor Flores was reviving the approach to materialization of identity that had been deployed by a widely beloved former mayor of Cusco, Daniel Estrada, who in the late 1980s and early 90s erected a series of Inca-referring monuments and other urban embellishments in the historic center so as to engender a pride of self and place amongst the populace. Like Flores, Estrada was reviled by the official cultural sector, but his monuments have remained, and Estrada was more persuasive than Flores in his inclusion of the Cusco citizenry in grand inaugural events for each of his projects, at which he eloquently explained the monument's significance, linking past to present and relating the object to his populist political platform. Even though the DRCC believed that the Ushnu and statue were going to be removed as soon as the festival was over, the DRCC protested the temporary installation in the Plaza de Armas. In their first round of written complaints, the DRCC said the Plaza de Armas lies within the delimitation of the nationally declared monumental urban environment and thus is protected by the general law of the cultural patrimony of the nation. The DRCC opined that there cannot be, quote, impulsive or enthusiastic interventions of the moment because the plaza is a premier public space whose physiognomy and the elements that comprise it possess an urbanistic value as an assemblage, and this place and space is part of a historic monument. The DRCC also expressed itself sociologically, saying, the historical and social processes that mold the physiognomy of cities, their streets and spaces, are very complex and generate associations of the collective memory over various generations that must be considered when changes are proposed, especially in iconic, symbolic, and emblematic places, as is precisely the Great Plaza. The DRCC said it respectfully requested the removal of the Ushnu and its statue, reminding the municipality with a slight threat that it is necessary to comply with the law. A few days later, the workers from the municipality did remove the Ushnu. That is when everybody realized the Inca statue was made of bronze and had been soldered to the top of the fountain and that it was going to remain. This is the moment when the affair changed dramatically in tone and intensity. In its second round of complaints, the DRCC emphatically affirmed that its office, not the municipality, has the constitutional right to manage the cultural patrimony of Cusco. Moreover, the DRCC complained that the mayor had not consulted the DRCC and thus had exceeded his administrative power, and that his actions were a grave attack on the cultural patrimony of Cusco by breaking the architectural harmony of the plaza. Therefore, the DRCC filed a lawsuit against the mayor and, as I said, demanded that he be taken prisoner and that the offending statue be removed. Moreover, the DRCC sought to bolster its authority in the matter by referring to Unesco, saying that the statue could result in a negative observation by Unesco because the plaza is a key element in the World Heritage inscription of the historic center of Cusco, and in their interpretation, not just national laws, but international laws prohibit interventions in places such as these, places that cannot be altered because they are classified as UNESCO cultural heritage. The mayor defended his action, and he mobilized the Cusco public to support him and the statue through counter-protests and a petition drive. He also placed poster boards on either side of the fountain showing that the original fountain had its piel roja and that the new Inca had merely replaced the statue that had been tumbled. Mayor Flores based the legitimacy of the new statue on the memory that older Cusqueños have of the piel roja with whom they had lived for decades. Thus, he labeled his action a reinstallation of that which had always been there on the fountain. Indeed, the mayor said he was correcting the iconographic error of the original statue by erecting an Inca on top of the fountain. And he said that by giving Cusco the Inca, he was awakening historical memory and identity amongst the populace, an identity that was always present in Cusco's popular culture. Even international tourism, he said, contributed to the construction of that identity, and the dispute continues intermittently to the present day. So what about UNESCO in this tremendous fight between the DRCC and the municipality? The DRCC had referred to UNESCO in its lawsuit against the mayor, but it had not consulted UNESCO. Does the statue impair the authenticity, integrity, and unique testimony to an ancient civilization that existed there? Criterion 3. Or the architectural ensemble illustrating a significant stage in human history? Criterion 4, the criteria under which Cusco was inscribed. Should delisting be demanded by UNESCO's World Heritage Committee if the statue is not removed? In November 2011, the mayor proactively sent a document to UNESCO requesting an opinion on the statue. 6 months later, in June 2012, a report appeared in the Cusco papers saying that a UNESCO delegation had arrived to inspect the plaza, but no further information came from this visit. Thus, it was an elated Mayor Flores who returned on December 9, 2013 from a trip to Mexico, at which he met Nuria Sanz, the head of the Latin American and Caribbean division of UNESCO's cultural sector, who stated that the Inca statue was neither an attack on Cusco's World Heritage nor against the monumentality of the historic district. Upon learning of Dr. Sanz's support for the statue, the director of the DRCC stated that Dr. Sanz had only been expressing her opinion and that UNESCO in Paris had not emitted an official statement. Importantly, and I've lost my place. Importantly, in accordance with Dr. Sanz's remarks, UNESCO's State of Conservation reports for Cusco in 2011 and 2013 do not mention the statue. Rather, their concern is with the destruction of Inca walls by a shopping center in the heart of the historic district, the construction of the new Marriott Hotel, and refurbishing in the Monasterio Hotel, as well as issues with other new buildings and facades in Cusco. Soon after his return from Mexico, the mayor installed a new plaque in the Plaza de Armas alongside the existing plaque that commemorates the various honorific titles of Cusco, culminating with the 1983 UNESCO World Heritage List designation. The new plaque is a direct reference to the Inca statue as evidenced by its image on the plaque and by the wording of the text. To the city, cradle of Latin American culture, historic capital of Peru, Inca Andean bastion and national pride. On the 30th anniversary of the UNESCO recognition as World Cultural Heritage, we ratify our commitment to conservation, preservation, and revitalization on the road to development with identity. There is no reason to choose between safeguarding patrimony on the one hand and development of cities on the other. The real protection is that which permits patrimony to continue to live, adapting itself to the changes of its times so as to be the authentic testimony of a culture. Signed, Irina Bakova, Director General of UNESCO, and Luis Flores Garcia, Mayor of Cusco, December 9, 2013. Irina Bakova's signature on this plaque certainly would support the mayor's position and bolster what Nuria Sanz had said, if indeed Director General Bakova actually gave her approval for the text. Regardless, The text resonates with the current state of heritage thinking about authenticity, cultural development, and heritage sustainability. It does, in fact, express ICOMOS's new paradigm of tolerance for change. Independently, in June 2014, the Organization of World Heritage Cities reached its own parallel conclusion, stating that although there should be coordination between the municipality and the DRCC, the municipality was legally empowered to authorize the execution of works of intervention in the city, and that the statue should not be considered an attack on the cultural patrimony. In my opinion, the statue hasn't damaged the cultural patrimony of Cusco, but rather it's bruised the egos of the cultural bureaucrats, intellectual, artists, and local politicians opposed to the mayor. This turf war has been enabled by a legal ambiguity in Peruvian legislation. The Constitution of Peru says that the state is the owner of all archaeological and historical remains that are expressly declared cultural patrimony of the nation. And a 2010 law says that the Ministry of Culture, represented in Cusco by the DRCC, has exclusive and excluding rights to manage Peru's cultural heritage on behalf of the state. Complicating this is the 2003 Organic Law Governing Municipalities. This law charges municipalities with the care of movable and immovable goods in public use that are functioning as local public services, and it refers specifically to historic, cultural, and landscape patrimony. The law also says that municipalities should promote civic culture, and it refers to local beautification, ornato local, which makes us recall the arrival of the fountain and the piel roja, and then the actions of the Cusco elite in 1911. The organic law governing municipalities would seem to give the city government authority over the open space of the Plaza de Armas. Moreover, the nomination dossier of Cusco approved by UNESCO stated that the municipality of Cusco is responsible to authorize interventions in the city and to participate in the preservation and restoration of the cultural patrimony. More than the legalities, the greater interest of this fight for me lies in the discourse of the two sides. The DRCC presents the statue of the Inca as a negative and foreign element, damaging the collective memory that Cusqueños have of their plaza. The municipality presents the statue as a positive stimulus for the construction of memory. Both sides coincide in saying that the statue affects the visual and sensory perception of the plaza. Indeed, symbolically and ideologically, the installation of an Inca in the Plaza de Armas compensates for the heavy weight of the cathedral and Jesuit church and the rest of the colonial assemblage in this space. For it is only with knowledge and keen eyesight that one can look out from the center of the plaza and see traces of Inca walls within the arched colonnade. The new statue of the Inca reminds the viewer that this Plaza de Armas was Jaucaypata. The third issue I want to address is visuality. It is not an exaggeration to say that the Plaza de Armas of Cusco is the most beautiful plaza in the Americas. It's dominated by two of the greatest works of Spanish colonial Baroque architecture, and by a graceful colonnade of arches that support the second stories of a series of contiguous buildings with whitewashed walls, wood balconies, and red tile roofs. Bright flowers in beautifully tended gardens surround the fountain and also serve to lessen the visual perception of the excessive width of the streets going around the four sides of the plaza. The fountain is the pivot of the plaza. The DRCC sees the statue on it as an intrusive element that injuriously alters the plaza's visual character. I'm not in agreement, as evidenced by this photograph of the plaza which I took. The statue isn't even always visible from within the plaza and not visible from beyond. Its view shed is thus limited. Visual integrity and visual impact have become an important issue in the management of built environments, as seen in the 2008 meeting in Montreal, convened by Christina Cameron and UNESCO's expert meeting in Agra in 2013. These discussions have focused on new buildings with architectural volume and height inside inscribed properties and in buffer zones and beyond. The kinds of buildings being condemned for their visual impact on heritage zones are highly visible, and they do not thematically reference the historic districts in which they are contentiously implicated. But the dispute between Cusco's DRCC and the municipality concerns a single person-sized statue that recalls the historic significance of its context. In assessing the views toward the Inca in the plaza, I think it's worthwhile to make a comparison with the Fuseaux of Paris, which are the zones of visibility whose sight lines along the banks of the Seine River are protected by the French state. Within one of the Fuseaux is the Louvre, a registered historical monument, although the interior patio of the Louvre is not visible from the river and thus outside the Fuseaux. We certainly should recall the acrimonious debate over the massive glass pyramid installed by architect I.M. Pei in that historic space. If the French, living in the city that headquarters UNESCO, permitted that architecturally discordant structure to be built in one of their most important public, historic, and symbolic spaces, then why should the reinstallation of the Inca statue have caused such hysteria in Cusco? Let's contemplate this question. What would have happened if the Piel Roja had still been standing when the nomination dossier was presented to UNESCO? Would UNESCO have rejected the nomination of Cusco because of the Piel Roja, bearing in mind that the fountain always had this crowning element and that the style of the fountain itself is incongruous with the qualities for which Cusco was proposed for World Heritage status? The DRC position is that the existence of the Piel Roja before 1969 is irrelevant to the mayor's reinstallation of the Inca statue, because the Piel Roja was taken down 3 years before the World Heritage Convention was created, 13 years before Peru ratified the World Heritage Convention, and 14 years before the historic district of Cusco was inscribed on the World Heritage List. This argument negates the possibility of change in a living World Heritage Site at the same time that it ignores the criteria under which the historic district of Cusco was inscribed. For UNESCO, the inscription of Cusco's historic center, like that of any other historic urban district, demands only that enough of the authentic fabric be preserved as to represent the integrity of the assemblage and its criteria qualities, and the operational guidelines do not prohibit the simultaneous presence of later structures already in existence at the time of inscription, even though they're not part of the outstanding universal value. Cusco fulfills these conditions. What we see then is that the official gaze, whether of UNESCO or the DRCC, is a leapfrog gaze that jumps over the urban landscape from monument to monument. What happens in the space between these ancient and historic buildings and walls? The answer is contemporary life happens, both architecturally and socially, but an official narrow view of international heritage management denies local sense of place, self-understandings of heritage, and ideas about authenticity. Conclusions. The statue of the Inca celebrated its 4th birthday in June, this past June, and remains a key venue in the Inti Raymi celebration. It has rapidly become an element of the popular culture of Cusco and even part of Cusco's intangible heritage, as seen in the habitual practices of Cusco's residents and tourists. Elderly Cusqueños look at it and recall the piel roja of their youth. For younger Cusqueños, the Inca is fast becoming part of their own landscape of memory. And I would argue that it contributes to the aura, the placefulness, the genius loci of the plaza. It contributes to what Michael Pezzet has called a feeling value. It is, in fact, the expression of Cusco's postmodern zeitgeist, which is deeply imbricated in globalization and tourism, and where conservatively defined authenticity in the built environment is not the principal frame of reference for local people's construction of meaningful social life. Quoting Nigel Walter, "The built environment is more than a backdrop against which we act out our lives, but is itself an active partner in our self-composition." Not only is the DRCC at odds with the municipality, it appears to be at odds with the vernacular construction of heritage in Cusco, by which I mean how ordinary Cusqueños think about their identity and what is culturally meaningful in their lives and their daily practice, as well as ritually occasioned performances of heritage. The Plaza de Armas embodies the ideological reality of Cusco in every era. It has carried the symbolic weight of the city as a seat of social and ecclesiastical power. It has denoted progress and change, particularly since becoming a world tourism destination and a World Heritage Site. It has always materialized the essence of the evolution of Cusco's society. The plaza and the historic district overall have a different value for Cusco residents than for Unesco and the DRCC. That local value takes many forms: a venue of social life, a frame for contemporary political discussions, a component of identity, an anchor for memory, a source of income for some, and a repository of political, social, cultural, and economic history that has played out over hundreds of years. Not only do different stakeholders hold different values, they hold different values simultaneously. And, as Gustavo Arauz reminds us, the values attributed to a heritage place evolve in respect to time and space. Most especially, the Plaza de Armas is the locus of conflicting values between the heritage elite representing themselves and the international heritage order, and the municipality representing the populace. Values implicate significance, and heritage significance is a dynamic and diverse social construct. The fundamental question I've raised in this paper concerns tolerance for change in a historic urban zone that is declared untouchable by virtue of being national and ultimately world heritage. The drama over the new statue of an Inca in the Plaza de Armas of Cusco is a useful point of departure for interrogating change in the public space of historic urban centers under the UNESCO regime. Historic urban centers have residents, commerce, social networks, and social and private services that occupy privileged and coveted space. The dispute that I have presented is the context for my argument that a living historic center should not be frozen in time. Various changes that occur in a historic district are reasonable under a range of international management instruments pertaining to the built heritage. Indeed, Helaine Silverman has gone so far as to argue that judicious, factually grounded reconstruction can be a valuable tool for public interpretation, reconnecting residents with the distinctive character of the place they live in, a form of heritage placemaking that facilitates understanding and enjoying the traditional spirit of the place. As Cusco's Plaza de Armas is overwhelmed with tourism providers in lieu of the vernacular services that once attended the local population, the Inca statue plays an important role in recalling one of two key components underwriting the district's inscription on the World Heritage List, the Inca occupation. At the same time, I argue that the municipality is using the statue to encourage the public to value heritage, not sanctifying original fabric, but seeing the continuum extending from the past through the present into an unknowable and unpredictable future. The fundamental argument that I'm making is that the symbolic attributes embedded in a historic urban fabric do not end with the era in which it was constructed. That built environment is reinterpreted time and time again, and change, which necessarily occurs, will add new layers of physical structure and meaning, even while cultural patrimony laws preserve a historic district's fundamental form. The plaza in Cusco is a story that has not reached a conclusion, and following Nigel Walter, it behooves us to take a narrative approach to historic preservation. Ana Pereira Roders has used the term re-architecture to consider the authenticity and integrity of built environments. She asks what has been lost, demolished, or decreased, and importantly, she asks what has been maintained or added that enhances the attributes encompassing significance. At issue is a judgment about the spirit of place as a living entity from the past, in the present, and for the future. I would argue that the reinstallation of the statue in the Plaza de Armas iterates the significance of the plaza as Jaucaypata and Cusco as the former capital of the Inca Empire. Moreover, I would argue that the statue is vernacular architecture embedded within the elite Inca and colonial historic center, and that together they incarnate and instantiate an evolving intangible cultural heritage in Cusco. Historic urban centers are a continuous historic process. The Plaza de Armas was once part of a holistically functioning urban settlement. Global tourism has obliterated the domestic nature of the plaza as it was as recently as 50 years ago, and tourism is quickly advancing out from the plaza to conquer more physical and social space in the historic district. The inscription of the historic core of Cusco on the World Heritage List is actually just an addition to its tourism-prompted social and economic transformation. But the inscription has been mobilized for good and not so good policy and action by a range of actors. The decisions made by the DRCC and the municipality concerning the historic district, involving not just the statue, but issues of far greater import, have repercussions in the lives of residents and those outside the district in terms of quality of life as experienced and perceived, sense of place generated, and identities constructed. Residents are both witness and active in these processes. This paper, then, is a call to advance a realistic professional practice and scholarship of heritage management for living historic centers, based on ICOMOS's new paradigm of tolerance for change and recognition of the different value systems at play in the dynamic social world of local stakeholders. Thank you.